Whoa, and all of a sudden I could see what was going on. My name is Andrew Geaghan. I am owner and brewer here at Geaghan Brothers Brewing Company in Bangor and Brewer, Maine.
So the restaurant's been in business?
Yeah, so the restaurant started in 1975. My grandfather started it way back then. I'm third generation. I came back into the family business after teaching high school science, physics, chemistry, and AP environmental science, and a master's degree in theology and a few years as a full-time pastor. So nice. I've done a few different things, and then came back into the family business, and they said, bring craft beer into the pub. And I said, well, that's all right. I think I can do that. Yeah, for sure. So we started with just bringing craft beer into our pub, and from there it just really continued to grow, and we were just so stoked with the craft beer consumers. You know, just it's such an awesome community. And I had been homebrewing as kind of my physics and chemistry background. I am one of the weird people that has never brewed an extract batch. So before I even brewed my first homebrew batch back, gosh, probably 12 years ago now, 10 or 12 years ago now, I spent months researching and doing all the equations and figuring it all out, and really dove in and went pretty hard at it. Just kind of my style, but it was a lot of fun, and we decided to try our hand at bringing craft beer completely fully into the pub with a 5-barrel brew house over there. We had kind of really understood that to do it at the level that we would have to do it, since the pub was already existing, that we needed some more help. So we brought in a very experienced, really talented head brewer to get us to a point where home brewing to commercial brewing is this whole different beast. Oh, yeah. And so he was a guy named Jason Courtney. He was super, super talented. He's now brewing in Montana. And he helped us get from idea and a little bit of home brewing ability to diving into commercial brewing. And then about a year, almost a year and a half ago, we opened up this facility. It's a 20-barrel brew house with 40-barrel fermenters. Everything in here, for the most part, we've got a few tanks that came with us that we're using for like chemicals and things like that, but everything else in here was custom built by TIG Pro out of Portland, Maine. So everything is super, super local. Pretty rad, custom brew house over here.
Awesome. So take us on a little.
Let's go.
Where does the process start?
Yeah, our process starts right here. This is our grain mill to auger to grist case. So we don't have a silo yet. Don't really have a place for it. So we're trucking around all of our grain. You can see here this bag right here is one half of a batch ready to roll. So we pick that up, throw that into the mill with the fork truck here, and we're off to the races. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So it all starts right here, gets sent up. Again, everything's super custom. You can see the grist case was designed so that we can actually open up the bay door to drive the grain in, and then close it, because it's got all kinds of weird angles and stuff. It's pretty rad. Pretty rad. We can head up over this way if you want to.
Cool.
Scope it all out. So everything over here, like I said, is super custom. We designed the system to kind of fit our needs, which is a really cool feature of what you can do when you work with a local welder.
Yeah.
So grist case, all the grain up there drops down through our grist hydrator into our mash tun. It's a mash lauter ton together. Grant is down under us. So what you see here, the grist case is where all the grains, once they're milled and we've cracked the outer husk and exposed the inner germ, they sit up there ready to drop down through here. So pull the chute, they come down through. Our batches are anywhere from like 24 to 3,600 pounds of grain per batch. We do 2 batches per day. So it's a 20 barrel system into 40 barrel fermenters. The really beautiful part about that is, when you're brewing, you're using essentially produce. It's a living thing. So your hops are going to come with tons of specs, tons of chemical analysis, all that sort of stuff, so you can manipulate those numbers and do the math and get pretty precise on your hop side. The grain does as well, but things like barometric pressure, things like humidity, they're going to change how your boil works. So when you get to the process of boiling, sometimes you're evaporating a ton, sometimes you're not evaporating quite as much, depending on how the world around you is. So double batching, you have a little bit more control even than a single batch on a commercial system like this, because you can get the first batch almost complete and test the numbers, and then work backwards from there to adjust the second batch to make it just right. So it's pretty rad. So right here it all starts. All the grain comes down in. We are mashing in here at a specific temperature, specific pH for each beer. So the higher the temperature you're mashing in, the bigger sugars you're going to get out. If you get too hot, you're going to start pulling tannins out, which is not favorable. If you're too low, you're not going to pull out much of any sugars. You're also not going to have your enzymes activated to convert starches into fermentable sugars if your pH is off. So there's that perfect window, and then some variability in that window. So typically for us, bigger beers, as far as like mouthfeel and how roasted and sweet we want a beer to be, the bigger the beer is on that range, slightly higher mash temperatures. So for a drier, lighter beer, you're going to end up with a little bit lower mash temperature. It's not going to pull out as many big sugars and those sorts of things.
Right.
Kind of just the first place that you're starting to really, beyond selecting your ingredients, on the process side, the mash is where a lot of that base foundation work for what your beer is going to be starts. So we really take our time with that. About an hour-long mash. We then do a circulation phase to make sure that any of the smaller grain particles that have gotten through the bottom, there's a wedge wire bottom that holds the grains. Some of the smaller particles will get through. We recirculate that up over itself to make sure that we don't take those to the kettle. If you boil those particles, you're going to get some stuff out of them that you don't really want. So we recirculate it, and then we send it from the mash into the kettle. So over this way. While we're doing that, we've got a big hot water tank and a cold water tank, so we can pull on demand water anywhere from 190 down to 34 degrees.
Wow.
On the fly, which is pretty rad.
Do you guys treat any of your water for specific brews or anything like that?
A little bit. We're not doing really any water matching like some people do. I feel as though a majority of commercial brewers are not really doing too much high-end water chemistry. Especially when you're in a place like Maine, and our water is fantastic. And beyond that, our water is really good for what we want to do for brewing styles. So I mean, like if we were going to try and make like a super light Helles lager or something like that, we might want to manipulate our water a bit. But with relatively straightforward ales, traditional American style brewing, our water is the perfect foundation for what that is. So. We don't do much. We do add some gypsum. Gypsum is solid for adding some calcium in and adding some extra potential to bring the hop profile forward, and it also helps us regulate the pH a little bit. So that's about all we typically do. We run everything through a carbon filter and a particulate filter, so ultimately we're starting with water that is pretty close to back to where it was before it was given some additives and stuff like that. So it's good water for sure that we're using, but that we've talked in the past about like a big RO system. So they make big reverse osmosis water filtration systems that will pretty much take your water completely back to H2O, nothing else. But for us, we really like our water.
Yeah.
We like the water of this region, and it adds some character to our beer that's favorable for us. So
yeah, because it was funny while you're saying that. I'm thinking like, some people. There was a brew that I talked to at the Tap Into Summerfest that was like, oh yeah, we do our broader this way for this kind of beer and we're that way, and I was like, oh, that's really impressive. But then I'm thinking about you guys, and you guys are all about like the local, home brew kind of feel. Yeah. And when you're doing that, you want your beer to reflect where you are.
There's a lot of truth in that. And now if we were trying to really match a style that was very different than the norm of what comes out of this region, we might manipulate. We might play. For us right now, it really works the way it is. It really works the way it is, and that's really it too. We're trying to make a local product that speaks to the local culture and the local people, and what better place to start than with local water?
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure.
So as we're moving from the mash tun over to the kettle, we're bringing that hot water over to rinse the grains and fill this vessel up. So this is really just a big boiling pot. Pretty rad. You can see 3 phases of steam heat coming. So that roar you might have heard a few minutes ago, that is our steam boiler. So I can show that to you. We got a 1.2 million BTU steam boiler over in the corner that heats the whole process. Yep. So what's nice about steam is you are really a consistent heat. You don't have a really high temperature that's going to scorch your sugars. So it really gives us a little bit more control over the brew. In the kettle here, we adjust our gravity, so the sugar content of the liquid's adjusted here. So if we end up extracting a little bit more or a little bit less sugar from what we expected in the mash, which can happen sometimes seasonally, depending on moisture content of your grains and different things like that, then we can adjust it and make sure that we're hitting that same gravity point. So if it's a little bit too low sugar content, you can boil a little bit longer. If it's a little bit too high, you can add some more water. Not that we ever adjust by very much, but we're really hitting that same specific gravity every time for our beers. Once you do all those calculations, all that sort of stuff, that's when you start the process of adding hops. So the hops are added in here. We use there's a handful of hop varieties that are kind of our go-tos, and then a bunch of other ones that we use for our array of beers. So in the almost 5 years now that we've been brewing, we've done 67 different beers. So that requires a lot of different hop varieties. But our mainstays, our sort of core brands, really focus on a handful of hops that are tried and true, old school, pretty great hops. So hops added at different times in the boil will give you different results. So, say one single hop variety can give you a handful of different flavors and aromas depending on how long you boil it and how you add it in. So there's a lot of play right there too.
Nice.
Yeah. When it's done with the boil, we ship it over to our whirlpool. This tank is really designed just to take that liquid and get it spinning. So as it spins, we inject it, pull the liquid out and inject it back in on itself. The wort then pushes itself around, kind of like kids in an above ground pool all running one direction. And you kind of, you get to float in it for a little bit. But in this, what you're doing is there are a lot of proteins that precipitate out of solution. So they have your essentially what you call your hot break, and that is a lot of your proteins that are in your grains come out of solution, turn back into solids when they're hit with high heat in the boil. That plus the hot particles, a lot of those, as you create that that circle motion, will start to collect in the center. It creates a really super simple, basic, not very good centrifuge type force, and it collects the liquids in one place and the solids in another. And the reason you do that is because if you can take less of those solids to the fermenter, you're going to end up with a cleaner fermenting beer.
Nice.
So circulate it, let it settle, and then pull it out. The solids tend to stick to the center, drop to the bottom, and we pull the liquid off the side.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's go back down this way. From the whirlpool, we bring it down through our heat exchanger. So cold water from the cold liquor tank, the big cold water tank there, comes in at about 34, 35 degrees. That's on one side of a stainless steel plate. On the other side is that hot wort. We crash that temperature down. We recollect the water that was cold water. It's now hot water. We collect that in our hot water tank, the hot liquor tank. So we try and recapture as much of that energy as possible.
Right.
And from here, we kick it out. The wort comes out of this through brewer's hose, much like this setup. They're getting ready. They're going to brew in the morning. Comes flying out. We inject a food grade oxygen into it that is necessary because the first phase of fermentation, the yeast love to eat up all the oxygen that's available. Most people think of fermentation as the anaerobic side of it, but the first part, the yeast will use the simplest sugars and the oxygen that's available to create a stronger lipid cell wall. Uses that to create a fatty cell wall that helps it in multiplying, and then also gives it the strength that it needs to ferment the beer down. So the first phase, you want to put oxygen in. You want to make sure the temperature's low enough that you're not going to oxidize your sugars, and you want to make sure you're hitting a pretty good parameter, not to have too much in there, but it's really important to have good oxygen in your wort to start. Fermentation starts, eats up all that oxygen, and then goes into the second phase of turning your sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. You see that happening in these tanks. Most of our tanks right now, we've got 6 40-barrel fermenters going at this point. Most of them are just about done. We are kind of at the end of a brew cycle, the beginning of a filtration cycle. So each one of these is just about done. We're going to filter them all out in the next couple of weeks, refill them, and about 12 days from now, if you were to see us, they all look about exactly the same as they do now. So we're about ready to get rolling. When we're done, most of our beers we filter. Our refueler we don't filter. A couple of our IPAs we don't filter, but most of our beers we filter. That process happens between the fermenter and the bright tank. So we take our beers, we run it through a plate and frame filter, pretty big plate and frame filter, run it down to about a 4 micron size. Our yeast runs right around 6 microns, so it catches all of our yeast, but it's a size that's not going to strip much of any flavor or mouthfeel. So it's a nice cleaning filtration, not really a polishing filtration. Comes into our bright tank. So this actually is filled right now. You can see with a batch of Presque Isle Blonde that was filtered today. Pretty rad. We carbonate right in here, make sure that our carbonation levels are right on point. Using this guy right here, good old Nagel, that uses basic gas laws of temperature and pressure to be able to tell us if we're hitting our carbonation levels just right.
Nice.
From here, it runs through our bottler or our kegger, and we can keg it out, bottle it out, do whatever we need to do to get it ready and packaged and out the door.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the kegger.
Yeah.
Or either the bottler
so
or the kegger.
The keg filler is pretty simple. It's right over here. We can look at it. Keg washer and filler. Pretty much what you're looking at, for people who don't see these every day, this is a coupler for a keg. So these go into the keg, you press that down, pushes down into the sphere, and you now have access to the keg. When we're cleaning, we have a couple of different cleaning solutions that we run through the kegs to make sure all the beer stone's gone, everything's sanitary and good to go. Rinse it out and purge and pressurize the kegs. When we're filling, instead of doing that, we use the same apparatus, and beer comes in and it fills as you release gas pressure out of the other manifold. Pretty simple. We fill 4 at a time. And it's amazing. You can rip through some kegs pretty fast.
Nice.
Filling 4 at a time. So, yeah.
Bang.
Over this way. Bottling unit, we're using a pretty standard 6-head McKean filler. We are over here. It's kind of tucked away right now, but you can see it over here. This we roll out, set up. We're still trying to conserve space, like
definitely,
and growing. But that fills 6 at a time. You bring that out, sanitize it, connect that to the bright tank, and you're ready to go. So we can do about, give or take, 50 cases an hour out of that. Little shy of that, but it's quite a rig.
Yeah.
Quite a rig for sure. This process over here is the labeling. So all the bottles get a code date sprayed on them, get a label affixed to it, and get put in a box, ready to roll.
So how many do you guys provide for any retailers or anything like that?
Yeah, so we are statewide. We have distribution statewide. So we are, with our Smiling Irish Bastard brand, we are just about, we're really Kittery to Fort Kent, so you can get us really anywhere with that. Smiling Irish Bastard is an American strong pale ale, nice dry hopped, hop forward pale ale, kind of like a super fresh version, Maine version of like a Sierra Nevada pale ale or something like that.
Cool.
So really nice beer. You can get it in the sort of north central to northern Maine market, so really anything Newport north. That beer is in Hannaford and Walmart and all those places. As you get south, it's more in specialty craft stores and those sorts of things, a lot of mom and pops and things like that. But we're sending out a ton of that beer. We're putting out probably on the order of about 300-400 cases a week.
That's awesome.
On average, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that one. The Presque Isle Blondes got a lot of coverage into the market as well. Bangor Brown and our Captain Cool also do really well in the market.
Captain Cool.
Yeah.
Is that cool with a K or cool with a C?
Cool with a K.
Nice.
Yes.
You gotta have it with a K.
Yeah, right? So, we're getting a lot of coverage with our brand. Moving into this facility, we've really seen just an explosion of the brand for sure, which has been fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty rad. It's
awesome.
Pretty rad.